All right, I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you for coming. This is the open forum for the second vice president of the faculty. We have two candidates that are going to be speaking to you today. We have Mr. Rob Catlett and George Durler here, who will be talking to you a little bit about their position and then opening up some time for you to ask questions. And we'll be out by 2:05. Okay.
Sounds good.
Just, I know they'd be excited. But, all right, does anybody like to start?
Go ahead, George.
Okay, I'm George Durler. I'm a professor of accounting over in the School of Business. This is actually my 17th year here at Emporia State. I was here for 1 year in the 1990s as a visiting professor, and then I came back in 2000. And as an assistant professor, and then associate, and just a couple years ago I was promoted to full professor. So I've been in Faculty Senate 4 different terms. I'm on my 4th term. So I've been on all 4 of the committees for Faculty Senate, Faculty Affairs, Academic Affairs, COCG, and also for a short time I was the chair of Academic Affairs, so I was on the executive committee. So I have some idea of how Faculty Senate runs. I've been here long enough to know people across campus. I've interacted with a lot of the administrators. We have a new president coming in, and I feel probably about the time that either Rob or I is the faculty's president, the honeymoon will probably be over with. And so I'm hoping we don't have any issues that we have to deal with, but at the same time, I think we're going to need somebody that can represent the faculty, and I think perhaps I can do that. So personal life, I am a single parent of 2 teenagers. I have a son that's 18, just graduated from high school, has been living with his mother, and he's moving back with me next week.
That'd be fun.
Fun, yeah. And I have a daughter who is 16, and she's a junior out at Emporia High. I'm on the Finance Pathway Advisory Council for Emporia High School. I'm on the Finance Pathway Advisory Council for the Department of Education in Kansas. I'm on the Educators Advisory Council for the Board of Accountancy. I'm a past board member of the Kansas Society of CPAs. So that's just a little bit of my background, and I'll turn it over to Rob.
I'm Rob Catlett, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Math and Economics. I love it there. It's fantastic. I've been in different departments, and it's just absolutely incredible. The things you probably want to know about me, you want to pay attention to how many of these things are there, because it potentially impinges on my ability to serve because of how busy I am. So I've, like George, have been on all the committees, except I've never been on COCG. I actually I had a preference not to be there. And so I've been chair of academic affairs, chair of faculty affairs, on Senate exec several times. I've been chair of the Gen Ed Council a few times and stuff like that. And also teach economics, teach a full load. I run our Center for Econ Ed, also our Center for Community Research, and I'm involved in the American Democracy Project, our leadership program, an honors mentor, and a bunch of different stuff like that. I don't plan to give it up. So I'm going to have to squeeze this in if I'm elected. George is a great candidate. I'm serious. You are not going to hurt my feelings if you vote for George. And I am especially thankful. I think we each have a responsibility to step up. As I'm looking at former presidents of the faculty, we've got several in this room, and I think we each have a responsibility to step up when that responsibility comes along. And so George and I, as you're probably aware, we're each approached, neither one of us sought this out. And so I'm going to be most eager to respond to your questions, but I also try to pursue a research agenda, and I'm involved in way too many things, but things I thoroughly enjoy. So I don't mind doing that. As far as my personal life, my 3 children are all grown. 2 of my daughters actually were econ majors here, and that was That was awkward. And it was really awkward. And I'll just share a brief story. My oldest daughter, and I didn't used to believe in group work kind of stuff, but when my oldest daughter was here, she was among several Shepherd Scholars in the math and econ programs. And so she was in class, and I think they were kind of concerned I was treating her maybe a little bit harshly. So I'd always pair them up, and then I would be able to grade their group work. And so then different partners would see how they had done, and would be able to see if I had somehow graded them unfairly. And it worked out fairly well. I mean, she was among a bunch of superstar kind of students that were just absolutely incredible. And then my youngest daughter wanted to be in any place other than ESU because she had been teased a lot in high school, and we had her tires slashed and all kinds of stuff, and it was a mess. So she wanted to go any place where she could get a fresh start. So she went to Cloud County Community College, one of two colleges that didn't have anybody from Emporia High. That and Colby, and so she figured there. And then she got run off the road on the way back home one time. Fortunately, she was driving a Volvo and it saved her life. And then she transferred to Butler, and that's where I met Jackie Vietti. But then she came here and she said, "Dad, I don't think the other students ought to know that I'm your daughter." And I said, "Well, Emma, I would respectfully disagree. I think they're going to find out anyway. Might as well go ahead." But she's concerned about it. And she asked me if the dean was going to grade her exams. This was when Steve Brown, our music faculty member, is the dean. So I asked him if he was going to grade her exams. He got a chuckle out of that. But so the first day of class, she's there. And students are raising their hands, asking questions. She's in the front. She raises her hand. She says, "Dad." So if you didn't know, this is my daughter Emma. So I introduced her, and so I've got 3 grown daughters, Johanna, and my wife Lori, who's disabled. So be happy to entertain questions. So is that how this is going to go, Tracy? Are you comfortable with that?
Well, I'm surprised because I think Rob's slogan is "Vote for George" and my slogan is "Vote for Rob." So.
I'm happy. Does anybody have anything else to say?
We could say other things, but I would much rather respond to their questions. And George, if you want to, I don't want to preempt you, but I would much rather respond to their questions.
I think that at this time we can open it up for any questions or.
Don't everybody speak at once.
Let me make sure my cell phone is on.
Let me make sure you understand this is not one of my classes. You can't ask questions. Yeah.
I'll ask both of you. What do you think are going to be the largest issues for the faculty senate this year?
This year?
Mm-hmm.
That's Cynthia's problem.
I didn't say I saw it. I just said, what are some of the things?
That's kind of difficult. We've dealt some really difficult issues in the past few years. Administrator evaluations was one. We finally got that taken care of. What's the bill that didn't get signed?
Oh, grievance policy.
The grievance policy. Yeah, I think the grievance policy is going to be something that we're probably going to have to work with, which kind of leads into, I think we're having a transition of shared governance on this campus. The faculty senate has always kind of been I wouldn't say legislative body, but the group that kind of initiated bills. And we have 2 other organizations on campus now. And I think we're going to be working through how those 3 groups interact and how they interact with the administration. And we're going to have some blending of roles and maybe some differentiation of roles. And I think the grievance policy is probably going to where that's going to first affect things. President Sean Rock wanted one grievance policy for everybody, and I don't know if that's possible. So we may end up with different policies coming out of each group and somehow blend those together to where we have a cohesive policy for everybody. So I think that's going to be one issue.
I would concur. I think the grievance policy we had it finalized. I'm kind of disappointed the president didn't sign it. We could have gone back and done something with the unclassified commission, I think, but we've had parallel tracks for administrators and faculty, separate grievance policies, and we really needed to do something about it. We've had, one of the things I didn't mention is I'm the ombudsperson trainer, and so we've had more activity than you can possibly imagine in terms of grievances and pre-grievance things in the last few years. And remember, I've been chair of faculty affairs several times, so we just have had a large number, an unusually large number of issues that have cropped up. And the way we would like to sort out the grievance policy is to make it more of a mediation policy as opposed to going right into a grievance. So you go into a mediation sort of thing. And we created it so that it was available to a wide array of different constituents, but not sure everybody read the bill in its entirety, so it didn't get signed. So I think it's in pretty good shape. We could modify it a little bit. But we've got different kinds of groups that may or may not favor it. So whether we can get agreement on all the different professional organizations to adhere to it, that may be a bit of a challenge. So in the meantime, we're stuck with what we've got. There are other issues that are going to come up. Oftentimes issues come up that we would have never anticipated. And so I'm going to guess that the unexpected is probably going to be the most important, other than the grievance policy.
Yeah, I think this year will probably be a year of not a lot of changes and controversies, just because we have an interim president at this point. We also have some interim deans and various other, we have temporary people at the foundation for the most part. So I don't think we're going to see some major changes until maybe spring semester. I really think those changes will occur next year and the year after that. So, I'm hoping we get a president that is wonderful, that every person's got their flaws. So there's bound to be some issues that are going to come up. So I don't think it's so much this year, but next year and the year after that will probably be more crucial.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a couple of different questions from my department. The first one, data is currently being gathered to determine if pay equity according to gender is an issue at ESU. If this is determined to be an issue, what would you do to continue the progress of assuring and maintaining equal pay according to gender at ESU?
First of all, I would love to get paid what my female colleagues get paid. I don't think it's so much a gender issue as a faculty salary inversion issue, with people coming in now getting paid more than people that have been here for a while. If you're doing the same job, you should get the same pay, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of other factors. But you do have to factor in market issues. We have a great deal of difficulty recruiting business faculty because there's so many other opportunities for those people, and so they don't have any reason to go get doctorates for the most part. So the ones that do get doctorates want to get compensated for that, and it's more than what we can afford. In terms of within a discipline, I firmly believe that it should be based on merit and what you've been doing, and gender should not be a factor. Should not be a factor at all.
And our pay is messed up. The structure of it is messed up, where some people are disproportionately compensated in comparison with others. And if there are gender issues, we ought to address them straight on instead of sweeping stuff under the carpet. Let me give an example that's not gender related, but an issue that I think the faculty should have been more involved in. And I think this is part of that shared governance thing. We each had to write some sort of a position statement or something. That was kind of a struggle. But if you read mine, you're going to see something that relates to this. And our new hires and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not 100% certain of this, but pretty certain of it with what the provost has said, that our new hires for tenure and tenure track positions have a minimum salary of $50,000 a year, minimum. So nobody coming in tenure track is going to earn less than that. So we've got people who've been here for quite a while who are earning less than that, but our merit system doesn't keep up. And we haven't seen increases in salary in quite a while. So some of it depends on the timing when people come in. Some people come in robust markets and their salaries come in relatively high. And even when we don't have pay increases, they can be in pretty good shape. So a lot of it depends on when people are hired. And that may have something to do with gender as well as when people are finishing and other kinds of things. So it may not be anything the institution has done, but the effect may have been to create disparities. Well, I would like the faculty involved in that process. I think shared governance involves listening to people, and I think it also involves having faculty working with administrators to figure out some of these policies, rather than to have administrators effectively determining the policies without faculty input. Now, ultimately, I think they have primacy with respect to budgets. I think that they have a responsibility to interact with us as faculty about what proportion of the compensation or what proportion of the budget goes to the academic part of the university, what part of it goes to how many administrators we're going to have, and what we do with student affairs. We don't have the final say on that, I don't think. I think that the administration has the final say. They have what I think is primacy. We have primacy with respect to the curriculum, so that we'll entertain their ideas, but we're the ones who ultimately determine that. It's not the administration that does it. But if we've got issues that, even if it's not things that the institution has done, but we've got institution with respect to equity in, not just with gender, with other things, where we have miscompensated people, especially undercompensated people, then I'm not asking anybody else to do it, but I would be willing to take a cut in pay to make it so that other people would have more money. Now, I'm definitely not asking anybody else to do it, but it makes me feel really uncomfortable when we engage in anything that resembles discrimination or anything that we're perpetuating that effectively is a part of a messed up system.
The other question was, faculty morale seems to be at a lower than low these days for various reasons. Raises, being asked to do more for less, etc. Can you share 3 specific things you might do to raise faculty morale?
I knew that was coming. You answered the first 2.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I kind of jumped
okay.
in.
You want 3 specific things that I would do, and let's just stretch this out, because the role of the second vice president of the faculty is not a huge role in terms of policy making, other than to present ideas. So 3 things that would affect morale, and I am convinced that the more, let's talk about some of the non-monetary things first. Some of the things that get us to be more cohesive is to have us take higher levels of responsibility in the shared governance piece. Instead of just listening to each other, effectively to garner the trust of a new administration, that have us do our role in trying to increase the shared governance, so we're making more of the policies of the university, and we're in it together, and we use our collective wisdom to guide the institution. So when we're a bigger part of that policy making group, I think along with that comes respecting dissent, celebrating dissent, and having it so that we can only look ourselves in the mirror to blame. We're ultimately responsible for the fate of this institution. We're going to have administrators come and go. We're going to have them giving a huge commitment to the institution, but it's temporary. The faculty are giving a much longer commitment to the institution, and I think we're the ones who are ultimately responsible for what this institution ends up being. So I think the more we gravitate to that, the more we trust each other, I think that tends to build morale. One of the things we don't do, the faculty club I think is an excellent idea, where we don't socialize all that much with each other. And the more that we have opportunities to interact with each other, not as much about what's going on in the university, but a wide array of other things, probably is advantageous. So I would applaud that. I would expand it if I had the funds to do it. And to find things that effectively allow us to bond as faculty, not just with people in our own departments, which I think happens often and happens naturally, but people in different departments and different schools and colleges. And finally, if there's any way to address some of these inequities, I think it's unrealistic to expect we're going to get big increases. I'm an economist. I'm not so certain it's even a wise idea to have big increases. And just imagine if, one of my students is now a professor at the University of Illinois, and I remember when she was at Iowa State, she was saying one of the people she worked with, her advisor on her dissertation, his salary from the university was $250,000 for 9 months, and he earned more than that as consulting fees. Just imagine if we were earning that. Now, you might think, oh, that's fantastic, but just think about the kind of a tax we'd be under from the legislature and others with highly paid professors, and this guy taught 1 class. So, along with those higher levels of compensation comes a different measure of scrutiny, and also a different kind of institution where we have much larger classes. We have graduate students teaching many of those classes, and we're engaged in a different kind of an operation. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about trying to push for giant increases in faculty salaries and have all of this be extremely well compensated, especially in a relatively low income community. So those are three.
Okay. Well, I'd have to share a lot of Rob's thoughts on that. I think shared governance is extremely important. I'm a big fan of shared governance. But for shared governance to work, everybody's got to play their part. We can't sit back as faculty, claim that we are in favor of shared governance, and then not be willing to participate in it. And right now, we seem to have a lack of involvement from a majority of our faculty. So somehow we need to stimulate the interest of, especially some of our newer faculty, in participating in faculty senate, but just on committee work and other types of service, which kind of also leads to, we do a lot of service at this university, and we don't seem to get recognition or rewarded for that. And I think it would help if departments and the university as a whole valued our service a little bit more in terms of promotion and tenure. You know, it's supposed to be there in the tenure documents and the promotion documents, and it's there, but is it just words, or do we actually value the service? I think that would help, because a lot of our faculty and staff do a lot of extra things, and it's not just the compensation, but sometimes just the recognition that they're doing that. So that would be part of it. I would agree with Rob. I think the faculty club, I've gone to several of those. It's kind of nice to interact with faculty across campus. The only problem I have with that is it's always the usual suspects that are there. It's the same people. We need to bring in the rest of the faculty. And sometimes that involves those of us that are going to those things grabbing somebody and say, hey, you know, I'm going, come with me. And eventually they'll start coming on their own too. So we need to have more of that kind of interaction. We need to know the people across campus, and that's one way to do that. So I guess that's number two. The other thing is the faculty president is the voice of the faculty at the Regents. And so you do, Cheryl knows this, you have the ear of the Regents sometimes, right? So if nothing else, you are the voice, you can voice concerns, you are the representative of the faculty at the Regents system, and you do go to the Regents meetings. And so that is another way in which we could work on the salary issues, various other things, at least make the Regents aware that there might be some issues that we would like them to address. So.
I would like to go back and add one thing. It was, I just didn't think of it initially, but one of the things I think that would help morale, remember I mentioned all those issues that might be classified as grievance, pre-grievance kind of things. One of the things I think that would improve morale is if we could get people to play by the rules, to follow our policies, to not try to find little quirks and idiosyncrasies that allow something to happen. Maybe it's allowed legally, but it certainly isn't the right thing to do, and it's not in the spirit of our policies. To the extent that we could get a greater adherence to the notion of trust and sharing those kinds of things, I think we would be in far better shape. It is really discouraging for people to feel like somebody's cut a path for them, and there's a license to abuse faculty. So the more that we could encourage following our policies, and we can do that when we speak collectively. It's very challenging to do it individually, and especially if that faculty member is the one under siege. It's almost impossible for him or her to do it. But we collectively can make a difference in that, especially within the administration.
People have a tendency to have low morale when they feel they have no influence and no control over their daily life or their promotion, tenure, whatever. So I think the more people feel that they're part of the system, rather than the system is affecting them without any influence from them, the better the morale will be. And again, shared governance is a way of doing that, but just interaction across campus can make a big difference. And, you know, I know there are people in IT that don't like it when I call, but I know them, Mark especially. And because I know people across campus, when I have a problem, I kind of know who to pick up the phone and talk to. And it doesn't mean I'm trying to circumvent the procedures. It just means sometimes I just need some advice. And I was just walking over with Kevin Johnson before and said, you know, if I actually do get elected, Kevin, I'm going to be asking you for a lot of advice because he's been there before. And I think when you've been around like Rob and I have been, you do know people across campus, and that helps in the long run. It's not just those official connections, but also those personal relationships that can make a difference. And if there's anything I'd like to do is create an atmosphere where we have more of those personal connections among everybody.
Almost as far back as I can remember, we've just been focused on enrollment, trying to get enrollment up. And I was kind of interested to hear the provost say at the most recent faculty meeting that he was interested in us starting to think, instead of increasing enrollment, what kind of enrollment do we want? So I guess my question, two-part, is one is, what do you think should be what do you think as far as the answer to that question? And then the second thing is, how do you think the faculty senate, the faculty president should go about trying to help the community come to a decision on how to respond to that?
Do you want me to go first on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have, people who know me know I have advocated for optimal enrollment for a long time. This idea of continuous growth is nonsensical when we don't match it up with our resources. So if we have a target enrollment, and I don't know exactly what that is, and it certainly isn't up to somebody like me to decide, it's up to the collective wisdom of our faculty and our administration, that the whole enterprise, I think, has a big part of that. But the faculty have to, I think, feel comfortable that we've got enough resources to produce quality academic environment. If we don't have that, I think we're badly misguided. And this idea that we're measuring our success by the number of bodies that we have, I think, is just incredibly misguided. So having an optimal enrollment, it could be a little bit smaller, it could be a little bit larger. I personally am comfortable with our size right now. I'd be comfortable with it smaller, I'd be comfortable with it a little bit larger. I'm not comfortable with it twice the size. And when I came here, this institution was on a glide path to have an enrollment of about 10,000 students. But it was also where there was a Regent's position control statement that effectively had a number of faculty assigned to, it was effectively one full-time faculty for every 20 full-time students. And so if we had some sort of a mechanism like that, that becomes a different kind of an issue. And we could have faculty, and I'm going to get a little bit more involved with it, you can shut me off if you would like, but increasingly I think we're going to face a trend towards more contingent faculty, people who are not in tenure and tenure track kinds of positions, because it provides more flexibility. It also is probably financially attractive, since they're probably going to be compensated less. And we can go in that direction, but I don't think it really furthers the institution to have too many. Having some is fantastic, but having an excessive number is probably not healthy. So I think the faculty senate, and especially the faculty leadership, along with the administration, have the responsibility to get the whole university community involved in those kinds of discussions, and figure out where, if possible, where the institution collectively is comfortable with that. So I think that's part of that process. But I think it is just incredibly misguided to keep saying, you know, when people are asking, did enrollment grow? I'm saying, well, that's not the right question. The right question is, are we able to provide the kind of academic experience we would like? And I think we're pushing beyond the limits in some areas. In my own department, not, you know, ignore economics and math, for example, we don't have enough resources. We could accommodate more students, but we just don't have enough resources. And I'm really proud of my colleagues for saying, no, we're not going to expand this unless we can do a good job with it. And that's really tough to do in the face of when we want more students and we want their dollars. In fact, somebody actually called them RPUs, revenue producing units. Well, that's it effectively is the state funding is declining. We're increasingly relying on students, but if we diminish the quality of what we do, we may end up diminishing a little bit, and actually I'm a little bit comfortable with that if we have to preserve the institution. That's not what I want, but we're going to face incredibly big challenges with respect to state funding. And so I'm not really comfortable saying, okay, we're just going to stick it to the students and ask them for more and more money so faculty can have big raises, and I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with that. So, long-winded answer.
Okay. I don't think it's right to push enrollment numbers just for the numbers. I think we need to have a balance of the resources and what we can offer. But I think we also want to recruit students that are going to be lifelong Emporia State fans, or for lack of, lifelong involvement with this university. And some of the things we've done in the past, I don't really believe do that. The quick fix of bringing in a lot of international students, I'm not against international students, but I don't think we need to treat it as a quick fix for numbers, because many of those students will not be lifelong Emporia State they're not going to have a lifelong commitment to this university. And really what we want are people that are going to be around and they're going to support this university, not just while they're students, but when they graduate and they go off and maybe they go back to their home country, but they're sending us students because they know we have a quality education. So we want people that are going to be a lifelong involvement with this university, and that's what we need to concentrate on. We don't want just students that come here because it's the cheapest choice, or it's convenient, or it's the only university in the United States they could get into easily. We want to recruit based on not so much quality, but on characteristics that will make them a lifelong Emporia State person. So I think we've kind of slacked off of that in the last 10 years or so, and we were going after numbers, and those quick fixes just didn't work. If there's one thing that I'll give President Sean Rock credit for, I think he got our name out there and people starting to think about, maybe Emporia State is a good alternative for me. We're not a Truman State either. I don't necessarily want to be a Truman State where we try to be an elite institution. But at the same time, I think we need to have certain characteristics that make students want to come here. One of the characteristics we've had all along is smaller class sizes, personal involvement from the faculty. If we give that up for numbers, then we're shooting ourselves. We're not going to be the institution that we've been, and we're not going to be the institution we want to be. So, doing it for numbers only is not the right way to go. At the same time, we can't let our enrollment slide as bad as it was. If you look at some of the charts, we really dipped down to a low point. So we have to have some sort of a balance, and I wouldn't say a minimum number of students, but we need to have an adequate number of students to justify why we're here. We need to recruit those students that have the characteristics that will make them lifelong Emporia State people. And we as the faculty need to encourage that. So for Faculty Senate, we need policies that, again, reward people for the service of working with students, that current students and potential students. A lot of studies have shown that personal connection, even at the high school level, that's what brings your students in. So we need those business education teachers or those graduates of our Teachers College out there telling students, I had a really good experience at Emporia State. I think it's the right place for you. I can remember when we had students from the Johnson County area coming here, a lot of students from there, and I asked one of them once, why'd you come to Emporia State? He says, I went to a school of 2,000 students. I wanted someplace where my professors knew me and that they took me as a person, not just a number, and I think that's what we do. And as long as we can continue to do that, then our enrollment will stabilize and we'll have the type of students we want. But we have to reward our faculty for doing those things that bring those types of students into our university. I agree with Rob. We should, our budget should not be based on how much tuition we can get out of the students. And we've had some huge increases in tuition recently. And we need to give our students a break financially. You know, the books, even the books are just outrageous anymore. So, you know, I go out of my way to try to find books that are cost effective. I switched from a $250 book this semester to a $50 book. And part of it, and then I'm supplementing what that book doesn't have with things on Canvas. But if the faculty aren't willing to do that, if they just say, oh, you know, it's the students can afford the book, then I think we do a disservice to our students, and that eventually that attitude comes across. And those students will go out and graduate and say, well, you know, yeah, I did okay at Emporia State, but why don't you check out this other school? So we don't want that.
You had another part of your question?
Yeah, the second part was with, I mean, how, and I guess the other part is, I guess I'm thinking, and I think what the provost was suggesting was more than just numbers, but like, what would be the appropriate mix of graduate versus undergraduate, online versus on campus, you know, and then how would the faculty senate help the university community to come to a decision about those sorts of things?
Well, one of the things that we've been looking at recently is common policies for online versus face-to-face. I think that's one way in which we can get that right mix. I again think online students don't have necessarily that connection sometimes with this university, so we need to build some way to do that. I'm not necessarily against or in favor of all online programs. I prefer the hybrid type of a program myself, where the faculty meet with those students at some point in time, but also some of that work might be done online. I think SLIM is a good example of where that works. Some of our other programs are good examples of that, to where the faculty still have that connection with the student, and yet the student has the flexibility of doing some things online. I don't think online students necessarily get that same connection with the university that I think is necessary. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Let me take a stab at it. The optimal mix of graduate students versus undergraduates, I think, is a collective decision on the part of the faculty and the administration. I don't think it's just up to the faculty. And I think we can engage the community, the university community, in those kinds of discussions, open forums, a wide array of different things. If we're really serious about entertaining that kind of discussion and then following through on what the collective judgment is of the university community. And I'm going to say things that may be a little bit indelicate here, but I think the faculty have a major role in that. Students have a role. We want to hear their voices, but I think the faculty have a major role in making that decision along with the administration in terms of whether we're able to fund what we would like to do. And I think our current mix is about 38% graduate students, and that's a relatively high proportion for an institution like ours. Our graduate enrollments have been growing. We've found some neat things to be able to do where faculty and students can connect with each other. It makes sense when we can deliver those high quality programs. And when we can do that and still maintain the academic integrity at a high level, I'm interested in expanding those if that's what the faculty would like to do. I also think that we have, I personally would feel uncomfortable if we decided to move away from a residential campus, so that if we were just exclusively an online type of an organization, like you see on late night TV. You'll see some of them in the eastern side of the United States. I doubt that they have very many students on their campus, and I've been on accreditation visits to other institutions that where their main campus operation was a tiny fraction of what they were doing in other places. And that really is kind of a challenge to maintain some of the academic integrity, some of the just to have some notion of what that is. So I would like to have not just, I would trust some of my colleagues to make some of those decisions, but I would like everybody to weigh in on it who has an opinion. And then to have us try to endeavor to do it. Now, that's a challenge. Going to get people to come and say, oh, nobody's going to listen to me. But if we were committed to doing something, and this is going to sound really bizarre, but we did something with the American Democracy Project with Stanford University called deliberative polling, where we actually went to Stanford to learn how to do this. It was a really cool operation to be able to do it. And it effectively elicits what the general sentiment is. We could do something similar to that, where people effectively have the ability to change minds. Stanford did it with Texas, and they went and did stuff with the public utility rate hearings. And so they did it with one community, then another, and then the Texas Utility Commission, which is equivalent to our Kansas Corporation Commission, effectively turned it over to this group of citizens to decide what the rates were going to be. And they had these different presentations that sometimes they were strongly in conflict, and then people got to ask questions, go back and visit about it in groups. It was a really cool way of doing things. And they said it didn't matter what they decided. They weren't going to overrule this group of citizens that became informed. Once they had that informed decision, then they abided by it. And it was a really cool process. So if we were going to commit to it, say, yes, we're willing to do it, and show effectively some of the elements of shared governance in their best aspects, I would like to do something like that, especially on something that's so critical to the institution. Make the process transparent, where somebody says, no, the fix was on, they wanted this all along, they just wanted to see if you were going to agree to it. I think if we do something like that, people are going to say, well, I didn't get my way, but I certainly don't disagree with the process. It was an open, transparent process, and people stand by and watch the collective wisdom evolve. That's what I would like to see. But as far as the exact mix, and I trust my colleagues more than I trust my own judgment on this. I don't know what the optimal mix is. And I don't know what the optimal size is.
I think each program may be different. So it depends on the resources, the faculty, and really what fits that particular program.
Any other questions?
Give us a hard one.
Yeah. Did you raise your hand? I'm sorry.
I would say I'd like to bring back more flexibility with the image of this university. I really would like to bring back the Power E, for one thing. Not so much, personally, I think the stationery looks great. I think the business cards look good. But I didn't like the fact that it was a real hassle for me to get the Power E on a shirt this summer for my students. And the fact that I can't put the Power E on a shirt that says School of Business. I mean, this is an old shirt. So I'm not saying bring it back for everything, but I'd like to see a little bit more flexibility with those kind of things, and not so much rigidity in some of the areas across campus. And that's just one example. But,
Image is important, I guess. I think kind of our motto around here is serious academics in a casual environment. And I would like to have people have the flexibility to do different things. Power E is fine. Other things are pretty good. I had to send I worked with the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City and the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis and some other organizations. And so we're partners in different things. I had to send our logo. And it was, I had to put, say, well, there isn't some sort of a symbol, this is the logo, so I had to go through and write a paragraph or so as to say, this is what it is, because they didn't think I was sending them the logo. Which was kind of interesting, but they understood, and I could just see the smiles on their faces as I tried to articulate that with still being rather delicate. This is who we are, this is what our image is. It's a group of letters.
I'll second that. We just spent $65,000 to $70,000 on new marching band uniforms and struggled to get an Emporia State lettering that nobody's ever going to see up in the corner of it, and because they wouldn't let us put the Power E on there, and you look at it and it's just this blob of lettering and so I'm with you guys, actually. I hope we can have some flexibility.
Image is important, and we've spent more than 20 years building an image based around certain symbols. And Corky is the same, and we've had that for a long time. You got to build on those symbols, not throw them out. So I don't know. I just want more flexibility myself, and that's something I think as a voice of the faculty you can do, maybe. So.
So, and one of the things that happens as faculty president is you're sometimes in a situation where maybe you're the only faculty member there, and they'll ask you a question, and at the end they'll say, well, we've now consulted the faculty because we talked to this, and yet you are in no position to say what everybody thinks.
Right.
I mean, how do you think you would handle that sort of situation?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I've been in Senate Exec, you've been there with me, and sometimes we have some really tense moments. And fortunately, we've got several faculty, but sometimes it's just a one-on-one kind of thing. And, you know, president of the faculty potentially can speak for the faculty when the faculty wish the president of the faculty to speak for the faculty. But otherwise, I'm not so sure that that happens. It's one individual speaking. It's a little bit awkward, but we have issues, especially in the summer, especially with some administrations that just take it as an opportunity when faculty senate and senate exec aren't there to do things that they probably wouldn't do in other times. And I think that's a serious issue, and I've gone through this several times in my mind, and people can talk me out of it, but if things would happen like some of the things that we've seen recently, and some of you are nodding your heads, you know exactly what I'm talking about, I would effectively bring the Senate back. I would say, no, you know, if you're going to try to do this, that we are not going to let these, what I personally perceive as a violation of our policies, we're not going to let it slide. We're going to bring it back. You know, if it's a serious issue and we're effectively going to violate the trust of the faculty, they may not all come back. We're going to bring it up, and then we'll hash it out. We'll see what happens. If you want to try to do that, yeah, you can give me as hard a time as you want. We're just going to do it. We're just going to stand face to face, toe to toe, and we're going to resolve this. It might just be Senate Exec that's able to do it, but if we have to bring the full faculty senate back in the summer, we'll do it. We can do it electronically. We've experimented with that in faculty affairs. I am extremely uncomfortable with the faculty senate and the faculty president in a position where that person's vulnerable to not stand up. And so one of the things that, you know, it may mean the end of my career, but I'm not willing to let that happen. I'm not willing to let the institution and some rogue administrators do things that are unconscionable that wouldn't be done during the academic year. So some of the time when it's that big of an issue, I think instead of trying to speak for the faculty, bring the faculty back together and let the faculty speak. And other times when you say, well, you know, here's what I perceive as a relatively minor issue, what color carpeting we've got, how much we're paying, you know, those kind of things. I would be uncomfortable about bringing them back. But if we're going to be terminating people without notice and other kinds of things that have happened in the summer, and there's nobody around, that's a completely different kind of an issue, and those things are crucially important. It may just be one or two people's career, but when we violated the trust of one faculty member, we've effectively violated the trust of the faculty, and I'm not willing to let that happen.
I think it's important that when you make statements, you clarify whether it's your personal opinion or whether you speak for the faculty as a whole. So the faculty president has opportunities for both, and I think you need to make it clear when you are speaking on behalf of the faculty and when you're not. I understand that sometimes you might say something and it will be construed as speaking for the faculty, and when that happens, you've got to make some sort of a correction of the impression. There's always going to be some things that come up. I mean, when you go to the regents, you are representing the faculty, and so you need to be conscious of what you say and what you do. You can't let emotion, your personal feelings or your emotion factor into that. You have to remember you're representing the faculty, whether you like it or not. So there's always going to be those situations where things are going to be taken out of context, and all you can do is do your best. I would agree with Rob that if you are on campus and something is happening during the summer especially, I think at that point, you've got to remind the administration that there are policies about this. Faculty Senate at the very least will review this when they come back in the fall. If it's something like a termination of faculty or staff, then I think you need to take a stand and say, you know, we need to wait on this, or I will call back the executive committee. You know, to me, that's the nuclear option, and I'd probably try to work something out before we do the nuclear option. So.
Any other questions? Okay. I think at this time I'd like to thank you guys for both Rob and George for presenting and being available for us to talk with, and want to announce that the Monday we will be sending out a ballot.
Remember, Monday's Labor Day.
Sorry,
No, right.
Tuesday. I did. That was in Monday but I guess it'll come out. It might still come out Monday. So it's electronic, so it'll be coming out. Actually, probably will be Monday morning. And it'll last all through the week, I think till Friday at 3 p.m. So you'll have an opportunity to vote, and their position statements and bios that what they've already talked about are going to be on that, so you'll be able to refresh your memory a little bit after nice barbecues this weekend. So we have refreshments, I'll just remind you, at the end of this, and if there aren't any other questions or comments.
One other comment, I want everybody that's watching the video to remember that we have changed the timing of nominations for the second vice president. So even though Rob and I are the candidates now, we will be seeking new candidates this fall.
Different candidates?
Different candidates, yeah, different candidates. And I would encourage everybody to consider it. I mean, we should not have a situation where we only have one or two people that are willing to do this. Everybody needs to be involved. You know, shared governance requires shared responsibility. And if the faculty are not willing to stand up and share that responsibility, then we advocate that to the administration. And we can talk about morale and everything else all we want, but if you're not willing to take the responsibility to be an active member of the faculty, then that whole system will break down.
And I want to add a final comment. This is kind of a plea to vote for George. I have admired his willingness to speak out even when it's uncomfortable. And that, I think, is one of the attributes of a faculty president. Somebody in a faculty leadership activity, to be able to articulate ideas that may not be his or her own, but so I've admired that, and so he would be a good candidate and deserving of your
Well,
vote.
let me put in my 2 cents. You know, Rob has long represented the AAUP on this campus, and yet I've dealt with Rob many a times over the years. I've dealt with him on a grievance situation, and I strongly believe that he always puts the university as a whole ahead of other things. He's not, I mean, he tries to balance his approach no matter what the issue. So.
Thank you.
So our slogans is vote for the other guy.
Yeah, you will not hurt my feelings if you vote for George at all.
Well, thank you.